Blythe, your husband isn't who you think he is. Dr. Monroe's words hit me like a freight train. I blinked, trying to process what he'd just said. The sterile clinic walls seemed to close in around me. I'm sorry, what? I managed to stammer. Dr. Monroe leaned forward, his eyes filled with concern. I've uncovered some troubling information about Harvey's past. There's evidence of his involvement in a fraudulent scheme. I felt compelled to tell you, given the potential danger. My mind raced. Harvey, my quiet, dependable husband of 5 years, involved in fraud? It didn't make sense. There must be some mistake, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. Dr. Monroe shook his head. I wish there was. But the evidence is clear. Blythe, I urge you to consider your safety. Harvey's past actions suggest he may not be the man you believe him to be. I stood up abruptly, nearly knocking over the chair. I need to go, I muttered, fumbling for my purse. As I rushed out of the clinic, my world tilted on its axis. The bustling street outside felt surreal, like I'd stepped into someone else's life. My name is Blythe, and I just found out my husband might be a criminal. I walked aimlessly, my thoughts a jumbled mess. How could this be happening? Harvey and I had built a life together. Sure, it wasn't perfect, but whose marriage was? We had our routines, our quiet evenings, our shared dreams for the future. But as I walked, doubts began to creep in. The way Harvey always changed the subject when I asked about his past. The tension that filled the air whenever his family visited. The locked drawer in his desk that I'd never questioned. I found myself in front of our modest suburban home, staring at it like I'd never seen it before. Taking a deep breath, I stepped inside. Harvey, I called out, my voice shaky. He appeared from the kitchen, wiping his hands on a dish towel. Hey, Han, how was the doctor's appointment? I studied his face, searching for any sign of deception. But all I saw was the same man I'd woken up next to for the past 5 years. It was interesting, I said carefully. Dr. Monroe had some concerns. Harvey's brow furrowed. Concerns? About what? I hesitated, torn between confronting him and playing it safe. About your medical history, I said finally. He mentioned some discrepancies. A flicker of something, fear? Anger? Passed over Harvey's face before he smiled. Oh, that. Probably just a mix-up with the paperwork. You know how those things can get confused. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. Was he lying? Or was Dr. Monroe mistaken? Listen, Harvey said, moving closer. I've got to run out for a bit. Promised to help Margot with some stuff at her place. You'll be okay here? Sure, I said, forcing a smile. Go ahead. As soon as the door closed behind him, I sprang into action. I had to know the truth. I headed for his desk, determined to find answers. Little did I know, my search for the truth would unravel everything I thought I knew about my life, my marriage, and the man I called my husband. I stared at the locked drawer in Harvey's desk, my heart pounding. The key wasn't in its usual hiding spot. Of course not. Why would Harvey make it easy for me? Frustrated, I slumped into his chair, my mind racing back to our wedding day 5 years ago. It had been a small, quiet affair, just us and a justice of the peace. No family, no friends. At the time, I'd thought it romantic. Now, I wondered if it had been the first red flag. It'll be our little secret, Harvey had whispered, slipping the ring on my finger. I'd been so desperate for companionship, so tired of my solitary life, that I'd ignored the warning signs. The way Harvey dodged questions about his past. The tense phone calls with his sister Margot that always ended abruptly when I entered the room. A knock at the door startled me from my reverie. I froze, panic rising in my throat. Had Harvey forgotten something? Blythe, you in there? It was Gideon, my manager from work. Relief washed over me as I hurried to answer. Gideon, what are you doing here? He held up a file. You left this at the office. Thought you might need it for tomorrow's presentation. I took the file, grateful for the distraction. Thanks. Do you want to come in for a coffee? Gideon hesitated, then nodded. As we sat in the kitchen, I found myself studying him. We'd worked together for years, and he'd always been a steady presence in my life. Unlike Harvey's family, who, everything okay, Blythe? Gideon's voice cut through my thoughts. You seem distracted. I sighed, debating how much to reveal. It's complicated. Harvey and I, we're going through some things. Gideon's expression softened. I'm sorry to hear that. Is there anything I can do? Before I could answer, the front door slammed. Harvey's voice boomed through the house. Blythe, whose car is that in the driveway? He appeared in the kitchen doorway, his eyes narrowing at the sight of Gideon. What's going on here? Gideon just dropped off some work files, I explained, hating the defensive note in my voice. Harvey's gaze flickered between us, suspicion evident. Right. Well, don't let me interrupt. As he stalked off, the tension in the room was palpable. Gideon cleared his throat. I should go. See you tomorrow, Blythe. After he left, I braced myself for the confrontation I knew was coming. Sure enough, Harvey reappeared, his face thunderous. What was that about? He demanded. Nothing, I insisted. Gideon's my colleague, you know that. Harvey scoffed. Right. And I'm sure he just happened to stop by when I was out. The accusation stung, but it also ignited a spark of anger. What about you? I shot back. How was Margot? A flicker of something, guilt? Fear? Crossed Harvey's face before he masked it. Fine. What's that supposed to mean? I took a deep breath, deciding to push further. I don't know, Harvey. You tell me. Seems like there's a lot you're not saying these days. The air between us crackled with tension. For a moment, I thought Harvey might confess, might offer some explanation for the growing web of lies I sensed around us. Instead, he turned away. I'm going to bed. Don't wait up. As I watched him go, a chill settled over me. The man I'd married, the life I thought we'd built together, it was all starting to feel like a carefully constructed illusion. And I was determined to tear it down, no matter the cost. I pulled out my phone, hesitating for just a moment before dialing. Gideon? It's me. I need your help with something. I stood in our bedroom, staring at the empty space where my grandmother's antique necklace used to be. My heart raced as I frantically searched through drawers and boxes, hoping I'd simply misplaced it. But deep down, I knew the truth. Harvey, I called out, my voice trembling. Have you seen my necklace? He appeared in the doorway, his face a mask of concern. The one from your grandmother? No, I haven't. Are you sure you didn't leave it at work? I shook my head, fighting back tears. It's always here. Always. Harvey's brow furrowed. Maybe it fell behind the dresser? Here, let me look. As he made a show of searching, I watched him carefully. Was that guilt in his eyes? Or was I seeing what I wanted to see? I'm sorry, honey, he said finally. I don't see it anywhere. I nodded numbly, my mind racing. First Dr. Monroe's warning, then the missing necklace. What was happening to my life? Later that day, I decided to check our joint bank account. What I saw made my blood run cold. Thousands of dollars were missing, with no explanation. I called the bank immediately, my hands shaking as I held the phone. There must be some mistake, I insisted. The customer service representative's voice was sympathetic, but firm. I'm sorry, Mrs. Calloway, but these transactions were authorized using your account information. There's no sign of fraud. As I hung up, a terrible realization dawned on me. Harvey. It had to be Harvey. That night, as we sat at the dinner table, I studied my husband. His behavior had become increasingly erratic over the past few weeks. Late nights at work, hushed phone conversations, unexplained absences. Everything okay? Harvey asked, noticing my stare. I forced a smile. Just tired. Long day at work. He nodded, returning to his meal. I watched as he shoveled food into his mouth, wondering how I could have been so blind. How long had this been going on? What else was he hiding? After dinner, Harvey announced he was going out. Margot needs help with something, he said vaguely. As soon as the door closed behind him, I sprang into action. I'd had enough of the lies and secrecy. It was time to get answers. I called Gideon, my voice urgent. I need your help. Can you come over? 20 minutes later, Gideon arrived with a small package. Are you sure about this, Blythe? He asked, concern etched on his face. I nodded firmly. I need to know the truth. Together, we installed hidden cameras throughout the house. In the living room, the kitchen, Harvey's study. As we worked, Gideon filled me in on what he'd discovered. I did some digging, he said quietly. Harvey's been making regular cash withdrawals from an account you don't know about. And there are phone records showing frequent calls to a number I couldn't trace. My heart sank. So it's true. He's been lying to me all along. Gideon placed a comforting hand on my shoulder. I'm so sorry, Blythe. What are you going to do? I took a deep breath, steeling myself. I'm going to catch him in the act. And then I'm going to make him pay for what he's done. As Gideon left, I sat alone in the darkened house, surrounded by hidden cameras and shattered trust. The woman I'd been just a few weeks ago, trusting, naive, content in her marriage, seemed like a stranger now. I heard Harvey's key in the lock and quickly composed myself. As he walked in, I greeted him with a smile that didn't reach my eyes. How was Margot? I asked innocently. Harvey shrugged. Fine. Just needed help moving some furniture. Another lie. I nodded, playing along. That's nice of you to help. As we settled in for the evening, I felt a strange calm settle over me. The cameras were rolling, capturing every moment. Soon I'd have the evidence I needed. And then, Harvey Calloway would learn that he'd picked the wrong woman to deceive. My hands trembled as I inserted the memory card into my laptop. 3 days of footage from the hidden cameras lay before me, promising answers I both craved and dreaded. I took a deep breath and pressed play. At first, it was mundane. Harvey moving through the house, talking on the phone, watching TV. But then, on the second day, everything changed. Harvey entered his study, looking furtively over his shoulder. He pulled out a burner phone I'd never seen before and dialed. "Margot, it's me. We need to move faster." My blood ran cold as I listened to their conversation. They spoke in hushed tones about bank accounts, transferred funds, and a plan to get out clean. "Blythe suspects nothing," Harvey assured Margot. "By the time she figures it out, we'll be long gone." Tears stung my eyes as the betrayal sank in. Not just Harvey, but Margot too. How long had they been plotting against me? I fast-forwarded through hours of footage until I saw Harvey sneaking into our bedroom. He went straight to my jewelry box, removing my grandmother's necklace and other valuable pieces. "That bastard," I hissed, clenching my fists. The final blow came when I watched Harvey in a heated discussion with someone on his burner phone. "Listen, Florence," he snapped. "I don't care what you think of Blythe. This isn't about her. It's about securing our future. Florence, Harvey's mother. She was in on it too." I sat back, my mind reeling. The entire Calloway family had been conspiring against me, draining my accounts, stealing my possessions, all while I remained blissfully unaware. A knock at the door startled me. "Blythe, you in there?" It was Gideon. I quickly closed the laptop and wiped my eyes. "Come in," I called, trying to steady my voice. Gideon entered, concern etched on his face. "I came as soon as I got your message." "What did you find?" I couldn't hold back anymore. The tears flowed freely as I recounted everything I'd seen and heard. Gideon listened, his expression darkening with each revelation. "My God, Blythe," he said when I finished. "I'm so sorry. What are you going to do?" I stood up, a newfound resolve stealing my spine. "I'm going to confront them. All of them. At the family dinner this weekend." Gideon looked alarmed. "Is that safe? Maybe we should go to the police first." I shook my head. "No. I need to see their faces when I expose their lies. I need them to know that I'm not the weak, naive woman they thought I was." "At least let me come with you," Gideon pleaded. "For backup." I considered his offer. Having Gideon there would provide some comfort, but this was my battle to fight. "Thank you, but no. I need to do this alone." As Gideon left, I turned back to the laptop, steeling myself to watch more footage. I needed to gather every scrap of evidence, every damning conversation. Hours passed as I pieced together the full extent of their deception. By the time Harvey returned home, I had a complete picture of their scheme. "Hey, honey," Harvey called as he walked in. "Everything okay? You look tired." I plastered on a fake smile. "Just a long day at work. How about you? How was your day?" Harvey launched into a fabricated story about his day at the factory. I nodded along, marveling at how easily the lies fell from his lips. As we prepared for bed that night, I watched Harvey with new eyes. This man, who I'd loved and trusted for 5 years, was nothing but a fraud. A thief. A liar. But soon, very soon, he would learn that he'd underestimated me. The family dinner was in 2 days, and I would be ready. Ready to unmask the Calloways and reclaim my life. As I drifted off to sleep, a small, satisfied smile played on my lips. The tables were about to turn, and Harvey wouldn't know what hit him. The Calloway family dinner was in full swing, but the cheerful chatter felt like nails on a chalkboard to me. I sat at the table, surrounded by liars and thieves, my stomach churning with a mixture of anger and anticipation. Harvey sat to my right, laughing at one of Margot's jokes. Florence, his mother, eyed me with her usual disdain from across the table. If only they knew what was coming. "More wine, Blythe?" Harvey asked, reaching for my glass. I nodded, forcing a smile. "Please." As he poured, I caught Margot watching us, a glint of something sinister in her eyes. She knew. They all knew. But they had no idea that I knew too. "So, Blythe," Florence began, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "How's work? Still slaving away at that pharmaceutical company?" I took a sip of wine, steeling myself. "Actually, Florence, I've been quite busy lately. Uncovering some interesting information." The table fell silent. Harvey's hand froze midair, the wine bottle tilting dangerously. "Oh!" Margot leaned forward, her smile tight. "What kind of information?" I met her gaze steadily. The kind that involves missing jewelry, drained bank accounts, and secret phone calls. The color drained from Harvey's face. "Blythe, what are you talking about?" I turned to him, my voice ice cold. "I think you know exactly what I'm talking about, Harvey. Or should I play the recordings for everyone?" Chaos erupted. Harvey jumped to his feet, knocking over his chair. Margot's wine glass shattered on the floor. Florence's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. "You've been spying on me?" Harvey shouted, his face contorted with rage. I stood up slowly, my calm demeanor a stark contrast to their panic. "I prefer to call it protecting myself. From all of you." Margot recovered first, her manipulative instincts kicking in. "Blythe, dear, I think you've misunderstood something. We were planning a surprise for you, Dash." "Save it, Margot," I snapped. "I heard everything. The plans to drain my accounts, to steal my possessions. The scheme to leave me with nothing while you all rode off into the sunset." Florence found her voice at last. "How dare you accuse us? After everything we've done for you, Dash." I laughed bitterly. "Done for me? You've done nothing but plot against me from the day I married Harvey. Well, guess what? The meek, naive Blythe you thought you knew is gone." I turned to Harvey, my heart breaking even as my resolve strengthened. "I trusted you. I loved you. And this is how you repay me." For a moment I saw a flicker of remorse in his eyes. But it was quickly replaced by cold calculation. "You can't prove anything," he said flatly. I pulled out my phone, holding it up for all to see. "Actually, I can. Every conversation, every secret meeting, every lie, it's all here. And copies have already been sent to my lawyer." The room fell deathly silent. I looked at each of them in turn, Harvey, Margot, Florence, seeing the realization dawn that their carefully laid plans were crumbling. "So here's what's going to happen," I said, my voice steady. "You're going to return every penny you stole from me. You're going to hand over my grandmother's necklace and any other items you've taken. And then, you're going to disappear from my life. For good." Margot tried one last time. "Blythe, please, we can explain, Dash." "Save it." I cut her off. "I'm done with your explanations. I'm done with your lies. I'm done with all of you." I grabbed my purse and headed for the door, pausing to look back at the stunned faces of the Calloway family. "Oh, and Harvey? I want a divorce." As I walked out into the cool night air, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. The confrontation I'd dreaded for days was over, and I'd emerged victorious. But as the adrenaline faded, a new emotion took hold, a mix of sadness and determination. This wasn't the end. It was just the beginning of my fight for justice. And I was ready for whatever came next. I sat in Gideon's office, my hands trembling as I clutched a steaming cup of coffee. The events of the family dinner still echoed in my mind, a cacophony of accusations and shattered illusions. "Blythe, there's something else you need to know," Gideon said, his voice heavy with reluctance. I looked up, bracing myself. "What is it?" Gideon hesitated, then pushed a folder across his desk. "I had a private investigator look into Harvey's recent activities. What he found? Well, it's not good." With shaking hands, I opened the folder. Photos spilled out, Harvey with a young woman I'd never seen before. They were laughing, holding hands, kissing. My stomach lurched. "Who is she?" I whispered. "Her name is Vanessa Reeves," Gideon replied. "She's 28, works as a real estate agent. And from what we've gathered, Harvey's been seeing her for at least 6 months." The betrayal cut deep, reopening wounds I thought had begun to heal. So all this time, while he was stealing from me, he was also planning a new life with her, Gideon finished gently. "I'm so sorry, Blythe." I stood up abruptly, pacing the office. He was going to leave me. Use my money to start over with her. That bastard. Gideon watched me, concern etched on his face. "What do you want to do?" I stopped pacing, a cold determination settling over me. "I want to destroy him. I want to take everything from him, just like he tried to do to me." "Blythe," Gideon said cautiously, "I understand you're hurt, but revenge isn't always the answer." I whirled on him. "Isn't it? He lied to me, stole from me, cheated on me. He and his family tried to leave me with nothing. Why shouldn't I return the favor?" Gideon stood, moving around the desk to face me. "Because you're better than that. Don't let them turn you into something you're not." For a moment I wavered. Then I remembered the look on Harvey's face at the dinner, the cold calculation in his eyes. "No," I said firmly. "I'm done being the bigger person. It's time Harvey faced the consequences of his actions." I grabbed the folder, my mind racing. "I need to meet this Vanessa. She deserves to know what kind of man she's really with." Gideon sighed, recognizing the futility of trying to change my mind. "At least let me come with you." "For support." I nodded, grateful for his unwavering presence in my life. As we left his office, a plan began to form in my mind. Harvey thought he could discard me and start a new life. I'd make sure that new life crumbled before it even began. We tracked Vanessa to a coffee shop downtown. As I watched her through the window, sipping her latte and checking her phone, a mix of emotions washed over me. Anger at Harvey, pity for this woman who had no idea what she was getting into, and a grim satisfaction at what I was about to do. "Are you sure about this?" Gideon asked one last time. I nodded, squaring my shoulders. "It's time for the truth to come out. All of it." As I pushed open the door to the coffee shop, I felt a shift within me. The naive, trusting Blythe was gone. In her place stood a woman hardened by betrayal, driven by a thirst for justice. Or was it revenge? I approached Vanessa's table, my heart pounding. She looked up, confusion crossing her face. "Can I help you?" she asked. I sat down across from her, placing the folder on the table. "My name is Blythe Calloway, and we need to talk about Harvey." Vanessa's eyes widened in recognition and fear. In that moment, I knew I held the power to shatter her world, just as mine had been shattered. The question was, could I go through with it? As I opened the folder, preparing to reveal Harvey's true nature, I caught sight of my reflection in the window. The woman staring back at me was a stranger, cold, determined, unforgiving. Was this really who I wanted to become? I sat across from Vanessa, the folder of damning evidence spread between us. Her face had drained of color as I methodically laid out Harvey's deceptions, his thefts, and his elaborate plans to start a new life with her using my stolen money. I had no idea," Vanessa whispered, her hands shaking as she picked up a photo of Harvey and me on our wedding day. "He told me he was divorced." A pang of sympathy cut through my anger. "He's been lying to both of us," I said, my voice softer than I'd intended. Suddenly, the coffee shop door burst open. Harvey stormed in, his face contorted with rage. "What the hell do you think you're doing, Blythe?" I stood, steeling myself for the confrontation. "I'm telling the truth, Harvey. Something you should have done a long time ago." Harvey's eyes darted between Vanessa and me, panic replacing anger. "Vanessa, baby, don't listen to her. She's just jealous, trying to ruin what we have." Vanessa stood up slowly, her voice trembling. "Is it true, Harvey? Did you steal from your wife? Were you planning to use that money to start over with me?" Harvey's facade crumbled. I can explain. It's not what you think. It's exactly what she thinks." I cut in, my voice ice cold. "You're a liar and a thief, Harvey. And now everyone knows it." As if on cue, Margot burst into the coffee shop, followed closely by Florence. The look of horror on their faces told me they'd overheard everything. "Harvey, what have you done?" Florence wailed, her earlier disdain for me forgotten in the face of her son's exposed deceit. Margot turned to me, her usual smug expression replaced by desperation. "Blythe, please. We can work this out. As a family." I laughed bitterly. "Family? You were never my family. You were all in on this scheme from the beginning." Harvey made a last-ditch effort to salvage the situation. "Vanessa, please. I love you. Everything I did was for us, for our future." Vanessa stepped back, disgust evident on her face. "Our future? Built on lies and stolen money? I want nothing to do with you, Harvey. It's over." As Vanessa stormed out, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. The truth was finally out, and Harvey was facing the consequences of his actions. Florence collapsed into a chair, sobbing. Margot stood frozen, the reality of their ruined plans sinking in. And Harvey looked broken, his carefully constructed world crumbling around him. "Blythe," he pleaded, reaching for me. "I'm sorry. I never meant for it to go this far. We can start over, make things right." I stepped back, out of his reach. "No, Harvey. We can't. It's too late for that." As I turned to leave, I caught sight of Gideon waiting by the door, a silent pillar of support. I walked towards him, ready to leave this chapter of my life behind. Harvey's voice stopped me. "You've ruined everything," he spat, his tone venomous. "I hope you're happy now." I turned back one last time, meeting his gaze. "This isn't about happiness, Harvey. It's about justice. And you brought this on yourself." As Gideon and I stepped out into the sunlight, I felt a mix of emotions wash over me. Relief that the truth was finally out. Sadness for the years I'd lost to Harvey's deception. And a glimmer of hope for what the future might hold. "Are you okay?" Gideon asked gently. I took a deep breath, considering the question. "No," I admitted. "But I will be." As we walked away from the coffee shop, leaving behind the wreckage of Harvey's lies, I realized that this wasn't just an ending. It was also a beginning. A chance to reclaim my life, to rebuild on my own terms. The road ahead wouldn't be easy. There were still legal battles to face, wounds to heal. But for the first time in years, I felt truly free. The woman who had walked into that coffee shop seeking revenge was gone. In her place stood someone stronger, wiser, and ready to embrace whatever came next. I glanced at Gideon, feeling a surge of gratitude for his unwavering support. "Thank you," I said softly. "For everything." He smiled, a warmth in his eyes that I'd never fully appreciated before. "Anytime, Blythe. Anytime." As we walked on, I felt the first stirrings of something new. Not just hope, but possibility. The future stretched out before me, uncertain but full of promise. And for the first time in a long time, I was ready to face it head-on. 6 months after the confrontation at the coffee shop, I stood in my new apartment, surrounded by boxes and the promise of a fresh start. The divorce was finalized, Harvey's deceit fully exposed, and I was finally free to rebuild my life on my own terms. A knock at the door pulled me from my thoughts. I opened it to find Gideon, a warm smile on his face and a bottle of champagne in his hand. "Thought we should celebrate your new beginning," he said, stepping inside. As we sat on my couch, sipping champagne from mismatched mugs, the glasses were still packed away. I felt a sense of peace wash over me. "I can't believe how much has changed," I mused. "A year ago, I thought I knew exactly what my life was. Now." Gideon nodded. "Now you're free. Free to be who you really are, without Harvey's lies holding you back." I smiled, realizing the truth in his words. "You know, when Dr. Monroe first warned me about Harvey, I was terrified. I thought my world was ending. But really, it was just beginning." We talked late into the night, reminiscing about the tumultuous journey of the past year. The shock of Harvey's betrayal, the pain of uncovering his lies, the strength I'd found in standing up to him and his family. "I'm proud of you, Blythe," Gideon said softly. "You've been through hell, but you've come out stronger." I felt a warmth in my chest that had nothing to do with the champagne. "I couldn't have done it without you, Gideon. You've been my rock through all of this." Our eyes met, and for a moment, I saw something more than friendship in his gaze. But he looked away, clearing his throat. "So, what's next for Blythe Calloway?" he asked, changing the subject. I took a deep breath, excitement bubbling up inside me. "Well, I've been thinking about that job offer from the research division. I think I'm ready to take on a new challenge." Gideon beamed. "That's fantastic. They'd be lucky to have you." As the night wore on, our conversation drifted to lighter topics. We laughed about office gossip and shared dreams for the future. For the first time in years, I felt truly alive, unburdened by secrets and lies. When Gideon finally stood to leave, I walked him to the door. We hesitated, the air between us charged with unspoken possibilities. "Blythe," Gideon started, then paused. I'm glad you're doing well." I smiled, understanding the words he couldn't say. "Me too, Gideon. Thank you for everything." After he left, I stood by the window, looking out at the city lights. My reflection stared back at me, and I hardly recognized the woman I saw. Gone was the naive, trusting Blythe who had let Harvey manipulate her. In her place stood a woman who had faced betrayal and emerged stronger, wiser, and more resilient. I thought about Gideon, about the potential for something more between us. But I wasn't ready, not yet. I needed time to heal, to rediscover who I was without Harvey's shadow looming over me. As I turned away from the window, my gaze fell on a framed photo of my grandmother. I picked it up, running my fingers over the familiar face. "You'd be proud of me, Grandma," I whispered. "I finally found the strength you always said I had." Placing the photo back, I felt a sense of closure wash over me. The past year had been a crucible, burning away the illusions and leaving behind something stronger, purer. I was no longer defined by Harvey's lies or his family's manipulation. I was simply Blythe, survivor, fighter, and architect of my own destiny. As I crawled into bed that night, I felt a sense of anticipation for what the future might hold. There would be challenges ahead, no doubt. But for the first time in years, I was excited to face them. Because now I knew the truth. I was capable of far more than I'd ever imagined. The woman who had once been content to live in Harvey's shadow was gone. In her place stood someone new, someone ready to step into the light and embrace all the possibilities that lay ahead. And as I drifted off to sleep, a smile played on my lips. Tomorrow was a new day, full of promise and potential. And I couldn't wait to see what it would bring.